So now let's talk about how you interact with your computer. All of you guys have grown up using what we call GUIs, and this is an acronym that's short for Graphical User Interface. Okay, and again, it's pronounced GUI. GUIs are visual interfaces to your computer's applications and data, and these interfaces are characterized by what we call WIMP interactions. That is, you use windows, icons, menus, and pointer to interact with your computer. And if you think about it, this is exactly what you do every day. Your computer has multiple windows. You use your mouse to direct a pointer or your touchpad to direct a pointer, and you click on an icon to start up a program, or you click on a menu to perform some action within that particular program. Maybe you click on other windows to change what application you're working with. And so this is what we've all grown up using, and this is what we're used to. Turns out that GUIs were developed back in the 1960s, 1970s, and personal computers became much more usable for everyday people and small businesses after their development. But computers were around a long time before the 1970s, and people obviously still used them, programmed them, solved problems with them, etc. So how were they interacting with their computers if they didn't have GUIs yet? Well, they used text commands. There were no mice, no touchpads, no icons to click on if you wanted to save a file, no easy way to navigate a menu. Instead, there was a key sequence that you used to start up a program, to switch windows, to insert text or to delete text. All of these things had a specific key sequence with them. You can think of things that you do today, things like typing Control-S to save a file, or when you're cutting and pasting, you may use Control-C, Control-P, things like that. It's the same concept, but rather than just a few isolated interactions, imagine that everything that you wanted to do with your computer had to have some sort of key sequence associated with it, and that's all you could use. There weren't alternate paths. You couldn't click on a menu and click Save or click Control-S. You had to know the key sequence and be able to use it. It's a startlingly different idea of computer interaction than what we have today. So what this brings us to is the idea of a command line interface. CLI is the acronym that we use. And this is what sort of an early interaction style with a computer would have been. The idea of a command line interface is that you type commands to your computer rather than clicking on the icons or the menus with your mouse. The end result is going to be the same. Your computer is still going to perform some action for you, like starting up a web browser, displaying some files, but you accomplish the task in a fundamentally different way. In this class, you get to do a little bit of interacting with your computer via command line interface. We want you to see this interaction style because it's something that computer scientists use all the time. Command line interfaces are significantly faster than GUIs, and it's what we call a power user environment. So it's an environment for people who are experts in their field, and they need to accomplish tasks quickly. The quickest way to do things is without taking your hands off the keyboard, and that's what a command line interface allows you to do. So again, computer scientists use this interface all the time. And for a few labs, we'll be using the operating system Linux rather than Windows or Macintosh. Again, this is to expose you guys to something a little bit different. Linux users have traditionally preferred a command line interface and that speed that it provides to people who are power users and expert users of the system. All the operating systems have some version of a command line interface. Windows has it, Mac has it, but it's much more hidden, and users of those operating systems don't use it nearly as frequently. So let's take a look at a program now and talk about the different parts of a command line interface. We'll be using what's called a terminal, which is just a small program that's going to provide us with our command line interface. So here's a screenshot of a terminal window, and you'll see me using this interface a lot in class, pretty much every day in fact. The entire window here is referred to as a terminal. So if I say start a terminal, this is what you're going to get after you accomplish that process. In the terminal, you'll see different things depending on how a particular computer is set up. But the first thing you'll see is what's called a prompt. So in this case, let me circle the prompt with red. So this part right here is what's called the prompt. This series of characters may be readable to you at this point, it may not. But it can look very different on different systems. When you log into the computers in the lab, you may see something that looks like, I think, $bash 4.1 dash or something like that. Again, that's not particularly usable to you the way it's set up, but it is configurable. As its name implies, when you see the prompt, you're being prompted to do something, namely enter a text command to the computer. And so you type your text command here after the prompt. So this part over here again is the prompt, and then the text command. You may just barely be able to see it in this screenshot, but there's a small cursor right at the end of the prompt. Sometimes this blinks, sometimes it doesn't. But again, this is a visual clue that the computer is ready and waiting for us to give a command. So what you'll hear me say in class or during lab is you'll hear the phrase, at the prompt, type this command. And so what you have to do is you have to locate the prompt in your terminal window and then type something. The terminal window will scroll down as you type more and more commands and as your computer executes them. In future videos, we'll investigate some of these text commands we can give the computer via the terminal, but for now, what I want you guys to remember is some of the vocabulary we talked about today for these different interaction styles. We talked about GUIs and command line interfaces, and we talked about the WIMP interaction style that most of you guys are familiar with. We also talked about the terminal as well as the prompt, and believe me, you'll see these again in future lessons.